Thanks, Mike. Good morning. Welcome to Mosaic. My name is Matt Koomen. I'm excited to worship with you guys this morning. We get to continue in our series on Mark. We're getting towards the end of that series as we're now getting closer to Easter. So you can turn with me to Mark 13. And as you're doing that, I want to talk briefly for those of you who are clean freaks. Anyone admit to that themselves? Spouses, don't point to your spouse if they are one, right? Or kids, like point at mom. They are one. Right? I live in a household where my wife very much is. I am fine with leaving a few dishes in the sink, but my wife would think otherwise, right? So we all know clean people in our lives. Freaks probably isn't the right word to use in that, but. So have you ever had it where you are maybe prepping for a big event? Maybe it's Thanksgiving, you're hosting Thanksgiving or Christmas, and all of a sudden everything has to be immaculate, right? You're edging the driveway because heaven forbid a piece of grass should touch our concrete on the driveway, right? Or like people are dusting off the mailbox to just give this perfect image of our house. We want to be prepared for people to come over. Or has anyone ever been a part of a moment where you get a text saying, "Hey, I'll be over in 15 minutes," and all of a sudden mom is shouting at everyone to clean everything, right? Stuff is getting thrown into closets. The clutter is hidden away because we want to be prepared for people. There's this interesting idea that, okay, we've got to make everything look immaculate in here. We've got to be on guard. We've got to be prepared for when people stop over. I want you to have that image, that thought in your mind as we continue today, because we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that later. But we are in a series on Mark, and I want to pull up the timeline if we've got that picture for us. Like we've talked about in the past, in the Gospel of Mark, the last week of Jesus' life is almost in the last half of Mark. So it feels like a few weeks ago we did the triumphal entry, and that's a Palm Sunday message typically. And all of a sudden we've slowly been going almost hour by hour these last few weeks in the life of Jesus. So a few weeks ago we did the triumphal entry. We're now in the moment of Jesus teaching in the temple a bit, and next week we'll spend some time looking at, we won't touch much on Judas agreeing to betray Jesus, but there's a really cool upper room discussion between Jesus and his disciples. And after that conversation, I strongly encourage you to be here again next week, because it really points to communion and why we do those things. And we'll get to celebrate communion together after this. But Mark finds so much significance in the last few moments of Jesus and the interactions he has with his disciples. So he spends a lot of time going into these things. But we're going to look at a smaller section of Mark 13, especially towards the end of it. But I want to spend a little bit of time right in the beginning, because in the Gospel of Mark, in Mark 13, some of this chapter is familiar with end times. Jesus speaks a little bit about what the end times are going to look like. Anyone enjoy looking at the end time stuff and the conspiracies and like where are we at? Phil, of course. We'll get you to be a Christian someday. We'll get there, right? I'm teasing. No, but end times are fairly fascinating, right? There's a lot of theories on end times and what is coming and the timing of all these things. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few moments here. But I want you to picture the disciples. For me, when I read through the Gospels, we know them to be some young guys, right? Some young guys, and Jesus is ministering them and kind of guiding them and prepping them for what is going to be coming for them to go out into the world. But they are young guys at the end of the day. And in the last few chapters of Mark, Jesus is really trying to prep them for, hey, I am going to die, and some of these things are going to happen, and a lot of these things aren't going to be good for you. Anyone have a friend that is like the pessimistic of the group, where you give them something like, I've got this idea, and they give you the worst possible case scenario, like, but we're all going to die at the end of that, right? I think in a way, I picture the disciples kind of having that moment that, oh, Jesus is just giving us the worst case scenario, like, oh yeah, you're all going to suffer and I'm going to die and all this, but okay, are you sure, Jesus? Like that seems like the worst case scenario. I don't think that actually is going to play out. Yeah, we're going to go into Jerusalem and we may meet some opposition, but okay, you're kind of showing us the worst possible option here. I think that's where the disciples' heads are at, because they never really seem to fully get it, right? As we even get closer to the death of Jesus, they don't fully seem real concerned about what's about to take place. So knowing those things, they are still leaning into Jesus and what he has to say. And Jesus is having this conversation with them at the beginning of 13. We're just going to spend a little bit of time at the beginning and then jump to the end here. But I want to first say this. Out of Mark 13, verse 1, says this: as Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings." And remember, the temple back in that day had just been built and remanufactured, really, by Herod the Great. They had put a ton of money into this place, so it would have been beautiful, right? There's good reason that they stop and say, "Wow, this is absolutely magnificent." Because it was. Verse 2, "Do you see all these great buildings?" replied Jesus. "Not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us when will these things happen, and what will be the sign that they are all to be fulfilled?" Or you can even start to see the disciples starting to like, "Okay, tell us more about this stuff. Like, what do you actually mean by this? When can we come to expect these things to be happening?" But in this moment, the disciples are a bit like tourists, right? They're looking at the temple. They're in awe of it. Josephus is a Jewish historian hundreds of years ago, and he said that the temple was built in such a way that when people would look at it and the sun was shining, there was so much gold on the temple that like they couldn't even look straight at it because it was so bright and shiny from the amount of gold that would be on it. And where there wasn't gold, there was actually marble. So people coming from a distance almost thought that it looked like there was snow on the temple. Like this temple that they're speaking of is truly magnificent and truly beautiful. But as great as this temple was, Jesus was very clear throughout the Gospels that the temple was not the main point. Right? It's still a building at the end of the day. And Jesus was very clear, especially in Matthew. He talks about, the temple can become an idol, but I am the one that should be worshipped. We shouldn't be worshiping this building as magnificent as it is. It is only meant to be a space for gathering. Jesus was always the one who was to be worshipped. But in verse 2 that we just read, Jesus says something interesting. "Not one stone shall be left on another. That shalt not be thrown down." Now there's an interesting historical fact that happens 40 years later that we see this prophecy from Jesus, this foretelling of what is to come, actually happens at the temple. Now, about 40 years after Jesus, there was a small revolution or revolt from some Jewish people. And they had some early victories in the first stage of that war or battles or skirmishes or whatever you want to call it. They had some early success, but after that, they just got decimated by Rome, just completely annihilated. And at the end of that battle, that skirmish, many of the Jews took off and got into the temple because it was the biggest building they had, the most well-built building, so they could kind of hide in that temple. Now, when the Romans found them in there, the Romans literally just started burning the temple down. And the fire and the flames got so hot, and this is what we know from the historian Josephus too again, is that the ornate gold detail that was all around in that temple melted. And what do we know about things that melt? They go into cracks, right? So when all the Jews were killed, Rome looked at this temple that was completely decimated and realized, where was the gold? In the walls. So these Romans at that point literally were told by some of the Roman officials, take down every single brick. brick by brick. We want the gold that's in those. They want to take that gold back into the city. So we literally see this crazy thing. Jesus says, that magnificent building you're looking at, one day will be taken down brick by brick, and that is exactly what happened. And it's shocking to the point of, as historians even today are looking at evidence of buildings from the time of Jesus, we can't find much from the temple because it was so taken apart brick by brick to get any bit of gold. They don't, to this day, still, they're not real sure exactly what location that might have been in. Like, that is how clear this was. And I just love that it points to what Jesus was exactly saying in this. Now, as we talk about some end time stuff, there's a few different views of end time, and we're not going to get much in the weeds on this, as exciting as Phil would think this message would be then. But there's a few different views. There's amillennialism, there's postmillennialism, there's premillennialism. Did I say that one already? Nope. Dispensationalism. There's lots of different ideas on end times. There's books on end times. Some of the greatest selling books are on what happens at the end. I remember even as a teenager getting into the Left Behind series, right? Just crazy series. But yet, end times, there's so many different views. I say all those different views because, and to point us to all of the scholars, all of the Christians, still to this day cannot agree on what the end times look like. So if they can't, let's not get so much into the weeds on it if they can't all agree on it, and let's see what Jesus is actually saying in it instead. Okay, can we do that? Yes, Matt. Perfect. Sounds good. It's about what the biggest response that my girls have for me as well. Okay, so as we're getting into this, one more quick thing before we jump into the end of the Gospel of Mark. There's a lot of imagery for the next 20 verses in the Gospel of Mark in chapter 13 that we're not going to look really closely at today. There's imagery, but not even to the extent of Revelation. If you've ever paged through or read through Revelation, there's a lot of crazy imagery in it. And a lot of times you just read it and you're like, what do I do with that? The closest illustration that rests in my heart that I find peace in is this. And let's say we took Benjamin Franklin, right? The old guy, hundreds of years ago. Right? If we took him and we brought him from his day and age and we time traveled him into our day and age and we sat him in an IMAX theater and we had him watch Star Wars and we brought him popcorn and pop and just showed him this full experience. He had one of those leather recliners that massaged and heated at the same time. Anyone? Like, it's almost worth the movie ticket price to be able to just sleep in one of those chairs for an hour and a half. But say you brought Ben Franklin there. That is a crazy experience for him, right? And if you told him, okay, now Benny, I need you to go back to your day and age and explain to people what you have seen, how hard would that be for him? Right, there's a lot of things he experienced. There's a lot of things he saw. There's a lot of images he saw. I mean, even Star Wars, right? The ships in the air. If you asked him to bring all of that knowledge and express that to the people who have never seen anything like it, how do you think those words would have come out? Right? How do you even describe a spaceship to people who have yet to see a plane fly in the air? Right? There's this thing in the air, and I say that because there's lots of images, there's lots of prophecies, there's lots of things on end time, there's lots of spiritual realm stuff that I don't think we can fully comprehend, nor should we get so lost in the weeds on trying to describe the time, the day, and all those things of when Jesus is coming back, because I don't think we fully have a picture of it anyway. We good with that? Okay, let's jump in. Mark 13, with all of that historical knowledge. I think it'll set us up well here. Mark 13, verse 32 says this. But about the day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Jesus is speaking back to the disciples about, hey, don't spend so much time thinking about all of these things yet, right? Be on guard, though. Be alert. You do not know when the time will come. It's like a man going away. He leaves his house and puts his servants in charge, each with their assigned task, and tells the other one at the door to keep watch. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or at midnight or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you asleep. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. Now we hear on this, be on guard. But be on guard for what? We know this a bit more clearly coming from one of the different Gospels, Gospel of John, verse 14. Jesus is describing a very similar scene. He says this, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you will also be where I am. You know the way to the place that I am going. So throughout the Gospels, throughout most of the ends of the Gospels, we see Jesus giving some of this final information for the disciples, saying, I'm going to go somewhere for a season, but I will come back. And different Gospels spend different amounts of time in the okay, but what's in the middle there, right? What does that season look like? But I want to spend a little bit of time on this John 14 section, this when Jesus is going to prepare a place for us. Because what does that look like? Why is Jesus actually doing that? Now, for them in that context, this would have been a very understood scene, okay? Because in that day and age, in that culture, a young Jewish man, when he was going to propose to a woman, when he was going to propose to a girl that he liked, and actually, it's not even that they liked, most of the marriages in that day would be arranged. But I found this fascinating. Arranged marriages, the divorce rate is like 4 to 6%. And then in the United States, the divorce rate right now is in between 40 and 50. So I'm going to prearrange my daughter's marriages. They just don't know that yet. That'll be a surprise for them. Let's keep that a secret for now. But the Jewish boys, after this engagement in this engagement process, however they would get engaged to begin with, whether it was arranged or not, would then go to their hometown where they lived at, where their father's house was. And at their father's house, these young Jewish men would add on to it. They would build a room. They would make a room with their hands. Now, what's most fascinating about this is they were not allowed to go get their future wife. They were not allowed to go get their bride until that was completed. And not just looks good enough. Kids, anyone been told okay, go clean your room, and after you're done cleaning your room, we can watch a movie or something. And you quick throw everything under the bed or under the closet, just make it look like it's clean in most of the area. And then your mom comes in and you're like, that's not good enough yet. This is not done to this extent. This is not mother approved yet. In a similar nature for these Jewish boys, they could not go get their bride until their father said, yes, this is complete. This is now ready. Go get your bride. There's a wonderful illustration of this understanding of building a room for the future bride to live in. And I think Jesus uses this illustration here for helping the disciples see, yes, this stuff is going to happen, but in the meantime, what I am doing is important. I'm preparing a place for you so that you can come back and live with me in my Father's home. I just love this image of Jesus just eagerly awaiting for his Father to say that his place is ready. He is eager to return to his bride. Now, verse 32 says, out of Mark 13, but about the day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. And I'm going to remind you of that John 14:3 verse. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me so that you may also be where I am. So why does a groom go to his father's house? To prepare a room, right? why is Jesus going away? What does he tell the disciples? I'm going to prepare a room. Right? When does the groom get to come back? After it's completed, right? Both Jesus and the groom. Who gets to know about this? Both Jesus says only the Father will know about it. And then Jewish traditions, only the Father would know and get to approve and say, it is now time. So who does Jesus say is the only one who knows when Jesus is going to be back? God, the Father. And there's some beautiful language throughout the Bible that speaks about Jesus and the bride and the groom and the church that I want to share with you that really depict who we are in this. One of them is this: and I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Right. So this verse depicts us as the church as a beautifully prepared bride, ready for her husband to come back. It also says this: let us rejoice and exult and give him the glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. To her it was granted to be clothed in fine linen, bright and pure. There's some beautiful language throughout the Bible that helps us see what it means for us, what this season without Jesus is going to look like. And this is what Jesus is trying to paint this picture for the disciples of, yes, I've said all of these things, and some of these things are going to be very hard for you, but understand I'm going now so that I can make something great for you. He's promised to come back when the Father has said, we are that bride of Christ. If you've been with us when we do a baptism here, there's a beautiful moment. You may have seen us give the wood boxes to the families. And what do you know about marriages or engagements today? Right, guys get down on the knee and give a box with a ring inside of it. There's this proposal of I will marry you. And even when we participate in profession of faith, there's this moment where Jesus has gotten down on a knee for all of us. Will you marry me? And it's up to us if we're willing to say yes to that or not. Right? And if it is a yes, Jesus is preparing a place for us as well. So even though in Mark 13, Jesus spends a little bit of time talking about these end times, in the midst of these things, there's some words that come up that I think calm the disciples, or at least give some of the disciples peace. And if you're hearing all this end time stuff thinking, oh my word, what do we do with that? If you're in Revelation deep now, right, what do we do with all those things? Jesus gives the disciples a few words that I think really stick out to me. Jesus tells the disciples to not fear the end. Jesus tells his disciples to not fear the end. He says throughout Mark 13, do not be alarmed. Do not be anxious. He's telling them to focus on what is coming ahead. Don't be so worried about all the little details. They have an assignment. Be alert. Be ready. Be on guard. As we wrap up today, there's two things I want us to hold on to. And they specifically are both in responses for us as who we are as the bride of Christ and what that means for us if we've said yes to Jesus. Right? If we think about that picture of Jesus getting down on a knee for us, and if we've said yes to that, what do our lives look like because of that? So, first question is, what would the life of a bride look like in the life of in the Jewish day? Right? She has in that world there was the payment for the bride. What's that called? Dowry. Look, yeah, you are on top of it. Nicely done. If I had candy, you'd get it for sure. The dowry, right? She's been paid. The dowry's been paid for the family. So this bride has been paid for and bought, which has beautiful symbolism for what Jesus has done for us on the cross, bought and paid for, right? There's that as well. But she's been set aside, and there's this image of, okay, she has now been set aside only for that man, and she will not be given to another person. Now, from that point, she is only devoted to what is to come. She is no longer looking for other men. Her father is no longer out courting other fathers to see, okay, who's your son? What's he look like? What could he bring to the table? That process has now stopped. They're not looking for other options. They know that they are bought and sealed by one person, and he is coming back. There's beautiful symbolism in that. And for us, I want us to have that same kind of posture. If we realize, if we've said yes to Jesus, that doesn't mean that in this next season, while we don't see Jesus necessarily, where the groom is off building an additional house, the room off from his father's house, that doesn't mean we get to go look elsewhere for other idols. That doesn't mean anything else gets our attention. That doesn't mean anything else gets our glory. That is meant and designed for Jesus and Jesus alone. In the same posture, the bride would wait patiently and eagerly for her husband to come. We should have that same kind of posture, not looking elsewhere for anything. Second thing is this, and I want to remind us of that verse 33 again. Be on guard, be alert. You do not know when that time will come. So what does this mean to be on guard? Be alert. We referenced it in the beginning of the message, and thinking about getting our house in order and getting everything tidy and making sure everything is well prepared. We want to do our best to, when guests come over, we want to make sure our house is prepared for them, right? We want to make sure food is there for them. We want to have drink options for them. We want to make sure they're that the house is at an appropriate temperature so that they'll feel comfortable when they walk in our door. And as the bride of Christ, what do you do when we put ourselves in that same position? Are we living our life in such a way that we are prepared and posturing for Jesus to come back at any point? Right? If we believe those words, that we can all agree, the Father is the only one who knows. He could come back before the end of this message, right? We don't know. He could come back next year. Jesus could come back not even in our lifetime, in our great-grandkids' lifetime. We have no idea. But our understanding needs that we need to be postured in such a way that we're living almost in like that last 15 minutes before someone gets home. Right, where you're doing everything you can to make not only yourself, but what's around you as presentable as possible. Now, don't hear in this that Jesus will only accept us if we're presentable. Right, but there is this posture of, if we live this life that we've said yes to Jesus, we now have this next season to do what with? Get ourselves right with God, but also look around to the people around us, our community. If we only have so much time, if we knew that Jesus was coming back next week, Tuesday, if we had 9 days, would your life look different for the next week? I would say yes. Right? My life would look different. I feel like I would be kinder to people. I feel like I would be more patient with people. I think I would spend more intentional time with my family. I think my phone, I'd throw it away. Like, what's the point of it? My interactions with people who I thought might be far from Christ, those would be different. My coworkers, I would be having different conversations with my coworkers. I would be trying to live in such a way where people were truly asking me, why are you living like this? And I could say, because I know Jesus, right? And that place that he's been preparing for me is almost done. And we don't know when he's coming back. But if we knew it was a day and we would act differently knowing that, as I've been preparing for this message, that's been my question. Would my life look different if I knew a day? Right? And I think it would. But the bigger question out of that is, should it? Right? Should we be living in such a way that's different? Or should we say, no, if I know Jesus is coming back at some point, we don't know the day, the time, the hour, should it be different than just living life like we always have? Should our posture be of that bride who is waiting patiently, knowing that, okay, let's get the things around us in order, the things that we have control over, the people that we have relationship with, let's do our best to use the time that we have. That image of the 15 minutes before somebody arrives, the amount of stuff we can get done when we know time is of the essence. Church, hear me. Time is of the essence. We don't know. Right? It could be years, but it could be tomorrow. I want us as a church to truly take advantage of the time that we have. Understand, we don't have an idea, but we do have this moment. We do have this next breath. So as Christians, if we put ourselves in the limelight of the bride of Christ, patiently waiting, how does our lives look different? I would argue that we should always live our lives with the urgency of pursuing the kingdom of God and growing that kingdom of God. Be on guard because the groom is coming. And I want us to live in such a way that we believe and we know that to be true. Would you pray with me? God, I thank you for this moment. And God, we stand in here a bit open-handed with some understanding of we don't know what the future will hold. Or there's a lot of stuff on end times that can derail us. But God, we give what we have over to you. And God, I ask that we just posture ourselves in such a way that we live with a sense of urgency. And we look at the relationships that we have around us, and we continue to pursue them for your glory. God, give us strength and give us courage to do everything we can do for you. In your name we pray. Amen.